Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar on DM32 Wi-Fi Smart Gauge features and upgrading options and any other features that you think you want to improve on or want to learn about is our goal today. So I have a basic overview on the Wi-Fi Smart Gauge and how it works and some of the features in the PowerPoint, and I also have some live gauges sitting here next to me with an iPad, and you kind of can see some of the actual features live. So if anybody's out there have any questions or can confirm the audio is working, that would be great. And if there's anything you want to make sure we cover ahead of time, make sure you throw that in the questions. So if you're not familiar with the DM32 Smart Gauge and you've heard about it or seen the videos on YouTube, a lot of other trainers are also now promoting the DM32. And starting next year, I know several large trainers that are going to introduce it as its main source for what it will train with. I know that Everblue and Corbett Lunsford and a variety of other folks out there are moving towards using the DM32 Smart Gauge as their main training gauge because it will control the Retrotec fans, obviously, and it also controls for those folks who have the Minneapolis fans, whether it's the duct blaster or the blower door. So because of its intuitive features and all the other great features that a gauge has, and the fact that it will control any fan you already own, a lot of trainers are going with this as the most universal gauge that's out there. And we'll go through a lot of other features that are beyond just using your existing fan. The one feature that I try to always point out is the calibration is a 5-year interval, which means you do not need to send your gauge back in order to comply with ResNet or BPI or any other weatherization program for 5 years. So once you actually have that, then you are free to use the gauge. We talk about and recommend doing a self-calibration check, but it's not actually a calibration, but it just determines that there's no issues with the gauge itself. Here's an overview of the fan itself, which I mentioned a second ago. I'll do it live. So on the top is the fan speed, and there's a time average. And here's channel A on the top, channel B below. This is what the screen looks like before you actually have an active test. So my results are down here, and channel B shows up here, right there below channel A, below the 0.3. On the left side is the device and range, and the DM32 does a great job of giving you an actual image of the device you're using and the range that it's on. So it tells you that you're using the duct tester 200, and at the bottom it tells you what range you're using. Almost anything on the gauge is actually able to be touched and activated. So set pressure, set speed, and the settings are all active buttons that are actually on the gauge you can touch. It's similar to your smartphone, but it is actually a pressure gauge, so you need to be have kind of like direct pressure. It's not touch sensitive like your phones actually, but I've had no problem with the device at all. So here's what the screen looks like when it's running as an active test. You can still see that the range and the device are all still there. Now you see a green line at the top where my fan speed is. And now I have my pressure that I'm running. And now that my results actually, not just CFM, but I can actually have the gauge give me the results live. So here I actually have it set up for a duct test, and I'm actually reading a CFM per 100 square feet at 25 pascals. And obviously I can do stop to stop the test. I can move up or down 5 pascals. So I can actually do a range or a multi-point kind of a test, getting the results on channel B as I move up and down. And at the bottom it's telling me that I'm seeking 25 pascals, so I know what my pressure is I'm trying to achieve at the top. To change the range, I actually am just going to press the icon itself, and what it does is brings me into the different options that show up with that, and I'll give you that live as we go through the gauge. To change the results, I actually just press on channel B, and a series of results come up. The images are easy to see, but I want to make sure you can read some of the results that you have. Obviously, you can do pressure for a variety of options. Almost all gauges now can default easily to CFM. But what Retrotec has always done in their gauges, many of you have the DM2, is calculates CFM per 100 square feet or 1,000 square feet, or if you're in Canada or European, it also does any type of units that you need. I've always loved the fact that it does air changes per hour automatically. Both the flow and area have either an area or volume that you enter, and it does all the calculations that you're used to doing in your class or with your calculator as soon as you figure out your CFM. So while I'm running my test, I can know right then and there live whether they're passing their air changes per hour or if their CFM per 100 square feet is also passing. There also is, of course, a variety of EQLA, or press the bottom button on the right, and I have another screen that pops up which has more EFLA and EQLA. And I know that other manufacturers don't even have some of these options on their tablet, which is the only way to actually get the results in general. All right, so I select which one I want, and I press the arrow to go back. And I went from CFM back to my home screen, and it now will read air changes per hour automatically live as I'm running my test. Some of the features that are included in all of the Retrotec manometers, as long as I've been using them, is that you can test at any pressure. So I'm not limited by just testing at 25 or 50 or 75 or need an additional app in order to run at any other pressure. On the device itself, I'll go through that. And basically I'm just going to hit set pressure and enter the pressure and hit go. And actually, I can usually set it for 10 when I do these kind of webinars so that we can actually have results and it doesn't become too loud. Keeping the last settings and converting all your results, those are all stuff that people, if you're used to Retrotec manometers, again, those are kind of fundamental. One of the things that's different about this gauge, besides the size of it, is that a lot of these features are now much easier to get to than the DM2. In the DM2, I'd have to go to settings and scroll down and go to that set and then select that one and then make it active. Here I can actually access all of those literally with just one touch of the button. Retrotec spent a lot of time, several years, creating this new DM32 gauge. And if anybody wants to reflect back in the last 2 to 3 years on what kind of phones you've had or what kind of electronics you've had or your computers, clearly you know that as soon as you buy something like that, it can become outdated. Probably on the drive home, I'm sure you've seen those kind of commercials, or, wow, I got this, and 3 months later, there's a better one out. Well, Retrotec acknowledged that technology is always growing and always improving. So they decided to make this gauge able to be updated. So you can actually update the firmware, which is basically the software that's inside the gauge. Some of your options and what it does or how it reads or the information that shows up on the gauge are all things that can be updated through a USB connection, I believe also through the Ethernet. So I can update my gauge when they have a new firmware release. I do not need to send it back or go through any of those other options. So this is one of the smartest things they added to their smart gauge. We do have an update coming up in about 2 weeks. That for those of you that have a DM32, we are going to do an online how to update your gauge with some new firmware that we've been practicing with, and make sure that it does work. So we're not trying to release something that hasn't been practiced with. So you'll get an email notification. We'll do a webinar so you can do it live with us, or you can watch the webinar or download the instruction manual on how to do that. So it's not that complicated and takes less than probably 5 minutes, 10 minutes if you want to go slow, step by step. So it's an easy thing to do to update your gauge. Here's one of the more challenging topics that comes up, and that is that the new gauge, the DM32, now actually controls the device, and I can now leave it actually at the fan itself. And now I don't need to use a USB, as you may have found out when you use your DM2, which has limitations on how far I can run a USB. I can now run the connections via Ethernet, which is basically an unlimited amount of gauges with some hubs. And in general, Ethernet is limited to about 100 meters with one wire, but you can do an unlimited range with hubs that also increase the signal strength. So there are limitations with USB, and in general, you can get a 15-foot booster cable. They now make some that are 32 that I'd probably boost it in the middle automatically, but in general, there are a lot of limitations with USB. But now you can actually, if you are a multi-fan tester or thinking of that for multifamily or some of the large building things that are happening now, is you actually can now do not have to run the tubes all the way back to a central location. So that's a great benefit for people that are doing multifamily. So Wi-Fi is the new hot topic that actually everybody's talking about with almost anything you have, from FLIR cameras to a variety of stuff. There's now almost everything you have has some kind of Wi-Fi interactive and an app that goes with it or something to do. The DM32 Wi-Fi will actually create its own Wi-Fi hotspot. So if you're familiar with the hotspot concept, some people call it an access point. There's no router needed. I can actually go to the gauge settings and tell it to create Wi-Fi, create a network, and then anything can actually now find that and connect to it. So for either my iPad or my computers, or I can run the Android or Windows tablets. Almost anything you have can be run, but I will be upfront so you don't ask, is it does not work with a Macintosh by itself. I have a Mac, I use Parallels, and it works fine. So it can create a hotspot or create a direct connection, and it can also join an existing connection. So if I have a hotspot, whether it's a smart device or another network in your office, or but it requires a router or requires some other hotspot. I actually use my phone when I go to a job. I can actually open up my phone, which has an internet connection, and create a hotspot, and now the gauge and my computer can all join that hotspot, and I actually have internet connection, and I can control the actual gauge itself. We'll kind of go through some of the stuff on how that works, or sounds maybe complicated, but it's actually fairly easy to accomplish. So I'm going to go through the software quickly. I think it helps a lot to see this on the slides, and then I can actually demonstrate how it actually is going to work live. So Virtual Gauge, you can download this application online, and it works on a PC. So it is basically a PC software. And what it does is it allows me to literally see the gauge face, whatever the gauge is doing, right on my PC. And I can not just see it, but I can actually control it. I can actually press the buttons on the PCs, either with your touchscreen or with my mouse, and actually start, stop, change the settings, change the device, do everything I can do actually on the gauge directly with the remote gauge. I would think that somebody asked if they'll work on the Kindle Fire. I can't imagine why they wouldn't, because Kindle Fire, I believe, is a Android-based system. So I'll be honest, I'm kind of guessing on that, so we can kind of confirm. I don't know if anybody has a Kindle Fire, but we can find out if that's accurate. One of the other features that the gauge remote does is it also has a simulator gauge in it itself, so it can actually run all by itself. So you can download this and practice how to use the gauge. If you're doing training, it's a phenomenal way to actually get your class to practice with a gauge, because it actually gives you live results while you're in the simulator mode. So I highly encourage you to go to the website, and you can download it and practice on your PC. And if you have the DM32, I'm hoping you're using this, because this is one of the best features that is part of the software package. I'm going to come back to the slide I have here and go through some of the stuff that we're going to do live, so we can actually see what it was I've been talking about and how this works. Okay, so this is what I have next to me. I'll put my hand up so you can see that I'm actually able to touch the devices and do those. All right. So I have an iPad sitting next to me. All right. I have the DM32, the newer one with the yellow sides. All right. And I have an older one which has the red sides, so people can see that they may have one that looks like this. They may have one with yellow sides. All right. But in general, they all will do the things we're going to talk about as long as it's Wi-Fi compatible. And to my best of my knowledge, unless I get a message otherwise, everybody who's bought one so far has either got the Wi-Fi version or the red one came with Wi-Fi as an option. What I'm going to do is I'm going to close these other two so we can focus on one item at a time real quick. All right, so hopefully that image is clear. You can see that I have a live gauge. So what I'm going to do now is just literally everything you can do on the software that we'll talk about can be done immediately on the gauge itself. So actually getting results or calculated in the fan itself, I mean on the gauge itself, everything can be done here. One of my challenges is I really can't see the screen. I have to focus on the actual video. So what I'm going to do now is go through that again. You saw my video. Okay, good. Now we're live. Okay, so at the top I showed you earlier that there's my fan speed. There's nothing running right now. There's the time average. There's a little icon here to tell me that I'm connected to a Wi-Fi network or I'm seeking one. The battery's telling me when it's blue that I'm charging. And again, this is the home screen where nothing is actually running. There's nothing active right now. So here's channel A. And here is channel B, which my results would come from. All right. And here's the device I have. So right now I have it set up for a duct tester on the mid-range. All right, down below I actually can see what area it would be running. And here's my set pressure, set speed, and my settings. All right. All right, so I just want to turn it off for a second. I'll turn it back on and we'll go through the beginning of the setup. Okay, so what I'm going to do is change the device, which I talked about earlier but didn't really go through it. So it's really just a matter of touching on the screen. These are all of the ranges for the duct tester 200. Obviously open, mid, and low. Right? As soon as I press on one of those, it would go back and select that as the range that I would want to use. I can select it again and then go to the bottom and hit Change Device. And these are all of the Retrotec fans themselves. And they give you an indication by a little thing on the side, besides the name itself, the 1000, 2000, 3000, but it shows you how many tubes are actually connected to the device. Right? So it gives you an indication as to what actually, if you're not sure which one you have, it kind of is also self-guided. All right, so I'm going to select the 1000. And again, it shows me what ranges do I want. So I automatically pick the range. I'll say B range. And now I'm actually using that 1000 on the B range. Some other options that I have when I go through is over in the bottom right corner. This actually is always the next screen. These are all of the Minneapolis Energy Conservatory devices, from the duct blaster to the blower door. I can also select the 220, the 110, or I can also automatically select the exhaust flow fan, exhaust flow meter, or their true flow flow meter. I know there's a question on that. I'm going to wait till the end to kind of address some of those. But if you have any questions about how to set up these, I'll make sure that those get addressed. On the next screen, which is a device which we actually used at our last pressure webinar, is a device where I can actually determine the flow once I know the size of an opening. I toggle again, and I'm back to the Retrotec devices. All right, so I'm going to select the 1000, and I'll say it's on the C8 range. All right. And I can also change the settings. So I'm going to do right now real quick. I'm just going to go and change the settings so it reads what most people are expecting to see. There it is. Is CFM. Just we start on a basic Everybody's on the same page. CFM, highlighted, and I go back. Oops. I can toggle through each one of the options and actually determine whether I want empirical or metric units. So right now it's set for CFM. Some other settings that are here I'll go through before I run a test. Oops. So under settings, we saw this earlier, but I'll go through. I'll show you how to do a baseline real quick. And the area and volume are right here, and that's what determines whether I want the CFM per 100 square feet. This is the square footage that I'm using, or the volume. If I'm doing air changes per hour, here's the volume that I use. And here's to change the time average. And the results displayed are the same way I hit channel B. The next one is how I set up or turn off my Wi-Fi connections. Some of the other features are, from sound on or more detailed things I want to do besides just going through an overview. I want to just stay on the basics right now. And I can also determine what firmware I have and or recalibrate the touchscreen if I needed to on the last page. Okay, so it brings me back to the beginning. Every time I toggle through the bottom right, I just keep going through all the screens. So I'm going to touch the baseline. It's asking me to capture or clear. There's nothing to clear yet, so I'm going to hit capture. And it's showing me the duration below, and it's showing me above what I'm actually acquiring. And if I just kind of force it to do something, then I can get an average out. And I'll leave a high baseline, something that would be kind of a catastrophic if you're going to do a blower door test. All right, so if I hit in capture, it tells me that my baseline is a negative 7.5 pascals. I can clear that, or I can use that in my readings right now. So I'm going to go back, and I go back again to the home screen. All right. And you can see it reads up right here, just below channel A is with negative 0.75 baseline. Okay, so to run a test, I'm basically going to hit set pressure. There's no speed control or knobs or anything with the Retrotec manometers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit set pressure. I can hit any numbers I want right now. All right, so I have a number screen. So it's a blower door. I would usually hit 50. It may get kind of loud. We'll try it though. 5, 0, and set. So it's showing me that I'm trying to seek 50 pascals, tell me at the bottom what my goal was. So I have some idea what I'm setting for. Right? This is the add feature, which many of you should be familiar with if you're using manometers, but I can turn it on or off, and it's a great visual display whether I'm using that or not. All right, so I have 50 pascals, but my opening on my device is not big enough to give me some results. 1 second, I'll just, all right, so if I can jog up or down with the green arrows, if I want to go higher pascal or lower pascal, and or I can just stop the device in general. Right, I try to make put my fan in the other room so we don't have to hear it the whole time. So we'll do set pressure. Nope, clear 5-0. Set. So now I have a larger opening, and now I have some results that I can work with. So most people may be used to working with CFM, and they pull your calculator out and then determine what I have. But what I can do now is actually go into here, my settings, and I can say I want air changes per hour, and that's calculated on the volume that I've already entered. And I go back, and now I have air changes per hour showing up right here automatically as the gauge goes live. So to me, it's a great feature. I can determine whether or not I have issues. I can write down the CFM. Channel A also works as the hold feature, so I can actually press hold, and it's holding and freezing the screen that I have. I can actually go now and go back and see other results that I wanted to. So if I wanted to know what the CFM was at the exact same time, I press CFM and go back. It's hard to see. And so now I actually can determine that I had 606 CFM if I wanted to calculate both or see what my results were. Press channel A again, and it goes back. The size of the gauge, if you can see obviously see my hand in the video, you can see that it's, you know, incredibly small. It's probably about the size of the keyboard you might have on your DM2, or definitely much thinner, probably about maybe 2/3 of the size, and much shorter than your DG700 or 500. It also has a clip on the back and magnets that are built in. I have Velcro because I use it for just demonstration purposes with when I set it up. Okay, so that's actually the gauge all by itself and all the things that it can do. I will do one more setting to show you where it is so people understand what that is. So I showed you baseline, and I can go into my baseline, and now I'll exit that. I'll clear it. Okay, and I go back. And on the top here is where I actually can do my network settings, just so you're aware of how this works. Because again, I talked to you in the beginning about there's two things that the gauge will do. It will join an existing network. So I actually have a router in my room that I just use to practice with, or I take it with the job site. It's very small and simple. Or I can actually tell it to join by, oops. I can toggle through to join or toggle again to create. And when I hit create, it will actually just establish its own network settings that I can then make my other devices join to. Or I can disable it. Wired is the other option that also shows up, and that actually is your Ethernet connection. Or I hit join, and it kept my settings. But if I had another router or something I wanted to join, I merely press the button in the bottom corner, which looks like a Wi-Fi symbol. And then I can actually just enter the name of the router that I would be working with. All right, so here's my settings that I have. And it's hard to see my screen. And there's a keyboard, and I can just enter the name of the router or the smart device that I'm using, or anything with a hotspot. It cannot be secured, which means it cannot have a password in order to directly connect from the gauge. All right, I'm just going to hit set, and I go back, and it wants to know, is it secure? I'm going to say no, it's not, and now it'll connect to it automatically. And I go back again, and you can see that it's connected, and my Wi-Fi shows at the top. So what that allows me to do is, whether I'm using joining a Wi-Fi signal that's in the area or in the room, basically, or if I'm directly connected to it, it allows me to actually use the software that you can download for free on the Retrotec website. So I'm going to move this over to the side, all right, and I'm going to open up the virtual gauge software. So you may have saw this earlier when I showed it to you. You would have saw the screen. So the settings are at the top here, and it usually opens up to allow you to do that automatically. But settings symbol shows up, and it allows me to figure out how to find the gauges, whether I want to do the drop down and determine whether it's on a network, or they're directly connected by a USB, or kind of both. So I'm going to leave it on network because I know that they're already joined for that. So I tell it to find gauges. And the one that's right here in the yellow is the 4004. That's actually the serial number for that gauge. And the red one, which I had earlier, all right, its serial number is the ending in 568. So what I was able to do is search for and find any of the gauges that I had that were on. So if you're doing a multiple tests, or you can actually set it up with to run 2 virtual gauges, which I'll show in a second, and they can each be running a fan from my PC. So the image you have in front of you is my desktop. So the same thing you're seeing in your window is what's on my desktop right now. I'm going to select the yellow gauge, which is the 004, and I'll hit connect. All right. I'm going to close the settings at the top so we just focus on the gauge itself. So this is the actual virtual gauge software on my PC, and over here on the other side, which I can now make a little bigger, this is actually the live gauge. All right. So live gauge here, all right, and I can control anything on the gauge itself by clearly just selecting the buttons. And as you notice, the virtual gauge also instantaneously changed. So if I want to change the range to, maybe it's A range, all right, virtual gauge also did that. At the top you can see that it's actually telling me which gauge I'm connected to. So if I have multiple versions of virtual gauge open, I can determine which one, confirm which one is controlling this window. I can also change it right here on the virtual gauge with my mouse. Oh, there it goes. Okay, slight delay. So if I want to even change the device, let's say I want to set up maybe I have a Minneapolis duct tester, and I have a Retrotec fan, or whatever fans you have, this will not just read them, but totally control them. All right. So I have my duct blaster running, and let's say it's on ring 2, pretty common setting. All right. And you notice that the gauge also changed as I controlled it on my PC. So I can actually just hit set pressure. All right, 2.5, set. So I can literally set up and control the entire gauge actually from my PC. So one easy way to actually make your life simple is to leave the gauge by the fan as you normally do. Take your PC into the kitchen or someplace that's nice and comfortable, open up a virtual gauge, and I can actually now run the fan literally just as I would if I was touching it right next to the door itself. So to me, this is one of the best features that allows you to really control, share, and let your clients see what you're doing without trying to talk over the loud fan. So I can also press the settings and get on channel B and to determine what results I want. So if I now want to go back to my air changes per hour, I know we all wish we had air changes per hour like that on homes we worked with. And I can stop the fan from here. So I'm going to uncover the other one, and I'll shift my camera slightly, 1 second. Okay, so now I have 2 gauges. All right, and what I'll do is move this one over to here. I'll put my camera in the middle now so we can actually see more about what's happening. I'm going to open up another version of virtual gauge. These are the features you can use for training or for running multiple fans. So here it's found the other gauge, and I'll tell it to connect. Hold on. One second. My red gauge is actually an older version, and also one we use for a lot of beta testing or durability testing. So it's seen a lot. So I actually have it also connected through the USB. So if you saw, I can connect it through the USB cable or through the Wi-Fi. And so now the gauge on the left, all right, is the gauge that you'll see here on the left also with the virtual gauge and on the right. So if anybody does duct leakage to outside, what I now have set up are a gauge at my blower door, I have a gauge at my duct tester, and I'm now able to run leakage to outside, sitting at the kitchen table or at the kitchen counter with my two fans right there controlling them from my PC. So over here on the right side I have my duct tester, and so I can make it do set pressure to 5, set, actually it would be probably set to 0, but on the other side I can take the set this up for a blower door. And I'll say I have both Retrotec systems. So I'll set up for the 1000, and let's say it's on C8. All right, so I'm not going to go into the logistics on how to do leakage to outside at this second, but I am going to explain to you that I can actually determine, because my one's actually not connected to a fan. So one side does have a fan, the other side is just sitting here. You see there's no connections at the top. But this is one way that I can actually now control two fans, two manometers from one simple location. So you can see that, again, this gauge is running from this virtual gauge, and this gauge is being run from that virtual gauge. Somebody asks us, how many gauges can you run if you have a router? That's really kind of limited by the router itself. So many of them are limited by, example, like 5 or 10 internally on how many connections it can make for you. Some of them could go much higher. I think it depends on how much you want to invest in a router. I have a basic Linksy router. I think it does up to 10 devices. So I've not done that yet wirelessly, but they all connect fairly well through that. Okay, so any other questions about the virtual gauge itself? I'm going to close down the one on the left, and I'm going to change the view on my camera slightly. One of the other things that it also will do on the virtual gauge, which I mentioned earlier, but I wanted to kind of demonstrate it, is it can actually work all by itself as a gauge. So if I open up settings, down at the bottom it has start gauge simulator. And when I press on that and I tell it to, it actually is now determining that I do not have anything connected to it. It's going to run all by itself. It tells me that it's a simulated gauge. But I can actually change the device. Let's say we'll pick the Minneapolis blower door with the B-ring. And I can actually tell the set pressure 50 set. And the bottom's giving me pascals right now, but I can tell it to tell me what the CFM is. I'm going to close this window here by pressing the settings. And I can press it again and change it to air changes per hour. All of the features that are available are also able to be used in the virtual gauge itself. Okay, so hopefully we're back live. Good. And what I have here in front of me is the an iPad on the right side of the screen. And we're back with the gauge. All right. So hopefully you can see that it is. All right. So again, my fingers are back. We're live. All right. And we're updating a feature, but right now it still exists. And when I start controlling the gauge from the Gauge Remote app, and again, this app works on Apple, either your iPad or your iPods. It also works on your iPhone. Or it can work on your Google devices, like your Android, whether it's a phone or your tablet, your Nexus or Samsung tablets. And it also works on your Windows phone or your Windows-type tablets. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the app, which is here on the bottom. All right. I already set the iPad up to be on the same Wi-Fi network that I've had in the room that we've been working with already. So it found two gauges again, just as the virtual gauge did. All right, and I'm going to use my pen so it doesn't smudge up the face of the iPad. So I'm going to select the 004 and connect. All right. So now you can see that, again, I'm controlling the actual gauge from the iPad device. I can change the device itself. So let's go over and I'll pick the duct tester, and ask me to pick a range. I'll pick the mid-range, and now I change it on the device itself. And our next upgrade will eliminate this, so it'll work both ways, but right now it says it's controlled by the app itself. Right? And I can adjust the volume. Until I do a test, I can still see it here, so I'm going to change the volume. Instead of maybe 23,000 cubic feet, maybe it's a smaller house of 15,000 cubic feet. All right, and that's because I have air changes per hour set here. So if I change this to CFM per 1,000 or 100 square feet, I press it again, I'll toggle through. Now I have 100, and I'll say OK. And at the top, I'll go back. All right. And now my area is here because it relates to what my results are. So if I press this, I can now change that. Maybe it's only 1,200 square feet. All right, so now it shows my area. It shows the area here. Basically, the iPad or the device is basically mimicking what I have on my screen itself. So I can do set pressure, 2.5, set, and now it's running the gauge, running the fan itself. So I can now walk around the house. Maybe you have a PC in the kitchen, but you didn't really want to roam around the house. If you're going to do CAS testing, a variety of other options. I can now leave my manometer in the CAS zone and actually walk around and see what the CAS levels are happening while I turn on or off fans, open or close doors. So there's some great features that I actually have. All right, hit stop. And that's a basic overview about how the device works. Here's how simple the app is that I've done multiple classes that are very general, non-technical, and I've had several people that actually go to their app store, whether it's Google or Apple, they download the app, they can figure out what Wi-Fi systems are in the room, they connect to it, and they start running the fan that I have set up, and I didn't even know that it was happening. Next thing I know, my fans are going on or off because people figured out how simple it was to download, install, and use the app. So it's pretty amazing. Someone asked if you can use this while you're using Fantastic. There's a challenge where if I'm connected to two pieces of software at the same time, that is actually a little tricky. So if I have Fantastic using the gauge, it's not so easy for me to actually connect to another device to it. There's a couple more features that I want to go through. I know we're winding down our time here. There's several software package. There's a software package that comes with the DM32. This one actually also works with the DM2. So there's a lot of you that actually have the DM2, and so you can use either one. The DM2 requires that you connect this software with a USB, but I can actually run this with the Wi-Fi with the DM32. What this is basically a simple data logger, and I open it up on the PC. I connect the gauge to it, and you can see in the yellow here I circled which gauge I was going to use, and I hit start logging, and I can start seeing the results live as it actually logs. I can also determine how frequently I want it to capture. So after it hits start logging, I hit stop, And what it does, it will generate a real simple Excel spreadsheet showing me the device, what my settings were, what were the serial numbers for the units, and I know that's hard to read, so I want to blow it up for you. So I actually ran a test, and I had the DM32 controlling a Minneapolis fan, and I had a DM2 controlling a Retrotec 1000 fan. And you can see the results are here. They give me pressure A, pressure B, and they also tell me what the results are that were in the gauge. So if I was running a blower door, then these would have been probably obviously a CFM there. I'm not sure what setting I had here. So, but these are the results exactly. This simple Excel spreadsheet can be uploaded to a Dropbox or any type of cloud options for you automatically and instantly, so you can share your results with your provider or vice versa, or code officials, or anybody wants to see what your numbers were with a time and date stamp to it automatically. So I went through the gauge remote options, whether it's your phone, Apple, Android. And I can't really demonstrate it, but you can see from the icons that it does control your existing fan, whether it's Energy Conservatory, whether the Minneapolis fans, or if it's any of the Retrotec fans that you also have. So when you saw my screen up there, if you're familiar with screen sharing, I can also share my screen running the virtual gauge or multiple virtual gauges on there. And I can share that with anybody that has an internet connection, whether you want to use GoToMeeting or Skype or Google Hangout. Any one of those allows you to share your results. And you can also give access to your screen to somebody else, and now they can actually control your gauge remotely. Please visit the website. In the middle there, we've put our most popular links or things that people are searching for, so you can actually go and see the download sections for the software that I've demonstrated for you and access those immediately. So you can buy a DM32, which we consider like a regular or non-Wi-Fi, or you can get the DM32 Wi-Fi version. We do have an upgrade special that's coming up in literally January, but you can buy in early and save $100. So if you pre-order before the end of the year, you can save $100, and now it's only $850 to trade in your DG700 or your DM2 and get the new DM32. And it comes with all of the software, all things we talked about, that's all included. And if you do get a DG700, it comes with a little speed control adapter. So basically, you're just going to put the DM32 on the shoe where you normally had your DG700 and use the same speed control that you already have. If you actually want to price out what it costs to do several of your calibration, send it in, get it back, you can see that the $850 is a remarkable price that will save you, an investment in a short amount of time. They do, the DM32 is available with systems right now. And that wraps up the general coverage for the basics. And anything else anybody wanted to cover, I gladly will hang out for a minute and go through those. We do have some upcoming webinars on Thursday, December 5th. Is a trainer's resource. That's actually the day after tomorrow. And next Thursday is air leakage in large buildings. And we almost ran out of our 500 seats last time we did something like that. So if you want to join in on that, please do so. And the last one we have for the year is wireless air leakage measurements, where we will focus on what you can do with the wireless capabilities and what their challenges are and their benefits. So please go ahead to go to retrotec.com, and in the middle there you can actually see the webinars as a list, and you can sign up and register for them already.